y'all ever heard of Zack Snyder? People talk about this dude a lot. From 300 to Sucker Punch to Justice League to Watchmen to the music video for the cover of Desolation Row that MCR did for Watchmen. Our guy Zack's done it all. Well, not quite all. I'm personally looking forward to his rom-com era. Is Zack Snyder a good filmmaker? Well, art is subjective. A person can find a lot of value in a piece of work that generally by the rest of the world seems to be ridiculed or ignored. I honestly don't think Mr. Snyder would have made it this far in Hollywood without some degree of talent. And a person's opinions on art aren't set in stone. After going through a lot of life experiences, you could find you look back on a piece of media you enjoyed years ago and find it doesn't hit quite the same way. For example, I spent a good few months convinced that my favorite album of 2018 was Owl City Cinematic.
Awestruck singing, awestruck.
Regrets, I've had a few. But speaking of, owls. Picture this. It's 2010, you're 11 years old, and you are so excited to see the movie adaptation of one of your favorite book series of all time. And then, pretend that you're me. And so you're not seeing Deathly Hallows Part 1, you're seeing Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole. Or as I like to call it, Lot Gatug, which is actually the name of a character in the books as well, fun fact. Catherine Lasky's Guardians of Ga'Hoole series started in 2003, and by the time this movie came around, it had 15 books published, as well as a spin-off for the kids who liked fuzz more than feathers. They all take place in a world inhabited by intelligent owls going on adventures. Redwall but owls. Warrior cats, but owls. If you read any series like this as a kid, you know what to expect with Guardians of Ga'Hoole. An extremely large cast of characters, way too complex lore, and a swath of kids who are gonna grow up to be furries. Those initial 15 books consist of 3 basic arcs. I like to call them the Soren Saga, the Corin Saga, and the Boren Saga. When they introduced the magical blue owls, at the time I personally felt the series had jumped the shark. And in 2009, production began on something that Warrior Cats would never have, a movie. I was a Warrior Cats fan too. If it hasn't happened by now, it's never gonna happen. Warner Brothers had the rights to the series, and they intended to adapt the first 6 books, aka the first arc. Looking back, this was clearly an attempt to make another sort of Harry Potter franchise, but animated this time. Though interestingly, instead of, for the first movie, hiring a established director of children's films like Chris Columbus, they went with Zack Snyder. What could possibly go wrong? Look, I'll give this movie this. It's gorgeous. The CGI was done by the Australian company Animal Logic, and they just knocked it out of the park. Like, this still holds up. And as a director, I think Snyder's first foray into animation went pretty smoothly, actually, probably helped by the fact that his movies before this did consist of a lot of CGI, and he had worked with Animal Logic before on those movies. If you went into this movie with absolutely no knowledge of the books, you'd probably have a pretty good time. The problem, I feel, is that some jerk at Warner Brothers took a look at these books and how, not big they are, and said, we could probably fit like 6 of these into one movie, right? And so everything that makes these books great, the world building, the escalation of tension, the character arcs, the politics, which I will get to, is all watered down for a flashy little flick that'll dazzle the eyes but not do much else. And yeah, Zack Snyder didn't write the movie, but he also didn't write Man of Steel, and I've seen people include that in analysis of his work. And I do think a lot of the adaptational choices made in this movie are consistent with problems that people have had with his work in the past. And also, no one was gonna watch a video called John Orloff's Owls Ruined My Life. But before I, get into the plot of this movie, compare it to the books, etc., we gotta take a break and do some science.
Hello everybody and welcome to Science. My name is Jules and I will be trying to do your science today. Historically, I am not great at science or politics. I was a film and media studies major and an English minor, so that's the kind of takes you're going to be getting from this channel. However, what I do think I'm pretty good at is allegory, metaphor, symbolism, etc. I'm going to try to run you through the basic makeup of like the owl species tree and explain how they represent different parts of human society through allegory in the Hoole books. I'm probably gonna get a ton of this terminology wrong. I'm very sorry to any biologists watching. Actually, you know what? If you're an owl expert who happens to be watching this video, only you can go to this timestamp and skip this, because for the rest of you, I do want to explain this. So using the scientific classification method, all owls fall under the family of Strigiform. And within Strigiform, there are two orders, Titonidae and Strigidae. The Titonidae order mostly consists of variation of barn owls. In the Hoole books, these owls tend to live in the forest of Tyto. And for convenience, I'm going to be referring to this group of owls as Tyto for the rest of the video, even though I know technically that's the name of the genus, not the order. Leave me alone. Tyto are barn owls. Strigidae are everybody else. And if we're going to translate to the society in the Hoole books, Tyto are white, Strigidae are people of color. This is not a subtle metaphor in the books. One of the major forces at work in the first arc of the books is a cult called the Pure Ones. The Pure Ones believe that Glox, the kind of owl deity, was a Tyto, and therefore believe in Tyto supremacy. A lot of different types of owls actually do fall under the Tyto umbrella, but the true Tyto race is Tyto alba, the common barn owl. Anything else under the Tyto genus or the Titonidae order are good but not perfect. And therefore, if you believe in Tyto supremacy, any owl whose species falls under the Strigidae umbrella, not worth a damn. So yeah, the Pure Ones are white supremacists. It's very obvious. I mean, it wasn't obvious to me when I was a kid reading them, but that was because I had basically taken no history classes at that point. As soon as I get to the point in history class where I learn what Nazis are, I think to myself, oh, so like the Pure Ones in Hoole. Again, really not subtle. Very obvious. Any adult who reads these books should pretty quickly realize that this is the allegory going on. And honestly, I think it would kind of stink if the screenwriter or director missed or neutered this allegory for the movie. Let's just hope that they don't. Yeah? Alright, let's watch the movie.
This was initially going to be an even longer video than it's probably going to end up being. I had a whole segment where I was going to compare the way they adapted Soren and Kludd's relationship to Brett and Owen Hart.
United we stand, divided we fall, right, Owen?
Well, you know, that's right, Brett. I know after Survivor Series, I said some things that I probably shouldn't have said. Yeah. It doesn't matter if they were true or not. It really doesn't matter.
I'm very sorry, Discorp. I have to cut that. I'm wearing this in your honor. The book opens on a family of Tyto alba, the common barn owl, living in the forest of Tyto. We meet the father Noctis, mother Morella, the eldest son Kludd, younger son Soren, and the baby daughter Eglantine. In human terms, I tend to think of the three siblings like this. Kludd is very close to learning how to fly and leaving the nest, so he's kind of 17, 18, late teens for sure. Soren's around like 12 or 13. He's really only just starting to learn about like the world around him and the dangers that it contains as well as the beauty. And then Eglantine, despite the fact that she is literally hatching from her egg in the first scene, is kind of the emotional equivalent of a toddler. Soren is full of childlike wonder. He loves listening to stories told by his parents and the family nest maid, Mrs. Plithiver, who is a blind snake. He especially loves the stories about the Great Hoole Tree, which is a kind of legendary community of owls where they can learn to fight and hunt. The Hoole Tree is kind of an academy as well as like a safe haven for owls in danger. It's all sorts of things. And to Soren, this idea of a place where owls can learn how to be heroes is very, very appealing.
Picture myself standing on a great cliff with the Guardians, ready for battle. We leap down.
His older brother, Kludd, on the other hand, is very much your rebellious teenage boy.
You have strength, Kludd, but owls make the best hunters for one reason alone.
Yeah, I know. Their silent flight. By the time I have my claws out,
the mice will have run away, and you and your hatchlings will go hungry.
He's moody, he's grumpy, and he is desperate for independence. In Maggie Mae Fish's videos about Zack Snyder, which I highly suggest, she tends to make the point that Zack Snyder's heroes and villains tend to want the same thing in different ways. And in this movie, That is definitely true as well. Kludd and Soren both want to fly. For Soren, flight would allow him to explore the wonders of the world and visit the places he's only heard about in stories. While for Kludd, being able to fly means being able to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. The way they are portrayed in the movie, they are sort of narrative foils. Soren is jealous that Kludd is older and therefore closer to physically being able to fly, while Kludd is jealous that Soren is proving to be a much more naturally talented flyer and that their father clearly shows some favoritism towards him. The brothers' bickering goes a bit too far one night while their parents are away hunting, when a scuffle between the two causes them to both fall out of the tree. The only adult around is Mrs. Plithiver, who can't fly and isn't strong enough to go down and carry them back up the tree. And ironically, Kludd and Soren probably would have become raccoon food if the scouts from the St. Aegolius' School for Orphaned Owls didn't pass by and pick them up. And St. Aegolius', or St. Aggies for short, is a branch of the Pure Ones where they kidnap children and force them into child labor. So that's pretty dark. But there are actually two major changes here to the inciting incident in the book that is actually even darker. In the book, St. Aggies and the Pure Ones are actually two entirely separate organizations. Gee, Guardians of Ga'Hoole, how come your mom let you have two evil cults? The Pure Ones, like I said, are the racial supremacy cult. Whereas St. Aggies is actually made up of owls of all sorts, it's not racially based. St. Aggies is a cult more obsessed with magic and science and brainwashing. The other big change is that in the book, Soren is actually the only one to fall out of the tree, and it's not because he's being impatient or annoying his brother. That's what Kludd tells him what happened from above in the nest, but when Mrs. Plithiver goes to try to slither to another tree and get help, Kludd threatens to eat her if she goes anywhere. It's pretty obvious what happens here, but it takes a while for our sweet baby boy Soren to actually accept the truth that his older brother pushed him to the forest floor where he would have inevitably died if not for the St. Aggies patrol. And we learn a couple books later that Kludd had actually come across some Pure Ones patrols passing by their tree during the daytime when they should be asleep. He is really into their ideology. He has been radicalized, and his final test to join the Pure Ones is to kill Soren. In the book's version of the story, the ethics here are clearly defined. Soren is an innocent little lad sacrificed by his evil brother for the chance to join a cult of, well, owl Nazi. But by complicating the characters of Soren and Kludd, the movie, by extension, completely simplifies the plot. I didn't even know you could do that. That's kind of impressive, actually. At St. Aggies, Soren becomes a child slave, literally forced to pick through his own shit. But he does make a friend, an elf owl named Gylfi. Gylfi, like Soren, can't fly yet, and she is the one to have actually fallen out of her nest because she was being rambunctious and she was trying to fly before she was physically ready. This establishes her as being sheltered like Soren, but more impulsive and quick-witted. She figures out that St. Aggies is trying to brainwash the captured owlets through a process known as moon blinking. It basically involves these kids sleeping and marching under the bright light of the moon in a circle while repeating their own names over and over and over again until the end of the night, when they stop, say their number designation once, and finally get to sleep. This is meant to render their actual names meaningless and their number designations a pleasant relief. Like I said, dark shit! Soren and Gylfi realize they can circumvent being brainwashed by sneakily remaining out of the direct light of the moon under the shadow of a rock the whole night, and this is what they do every night for what seems to be weeks and weeks. They are avoiding being brainwashed by the feathers of their beaks, but luckily they meet a St. Aggies dissenter named Grimble who is willing to teach them how to fly and hopefully help them escape. When they finally make it out of St. Aggies Canyon, they are almost stopped and Grimble is killed during the escape. But he dies of the hope that these two can make it to the Great Ga'Hoole Tree, inform the leadership there of what's going on at the St. Aggies Canyon, and hopefully put a stop to the cult entirely. To book readers, yes, I am skipping over Hortense and how the movie didn't even include her, which is bullshit, but like I said, I needed to streamline this. In the movie, instead of using their brains and strength to survive, Soren and Gylfi just stay awake through one night, meet Grimble that afternoon, and then are escaping by the end of the day. Grimble dies, RIP to a real one. Meanwhile, Kludd has been recruited into the Pure One's child soldier ranks, and he is actually there during Soren's escape, but when Soren tries to get Kludd to come with them, he says, no, these guys are pretty cool actually, I'm gonna stay. Though it is not explicit whether this is because he fully agrees with their ideology, or whether he just hates his brother.
Pure Ones are monsters. You saw what they were doing. They were moon-blinking other owls and they were turning them into slaves.
You're just weak, Soren. Still living in your dreams.
How could you join the Pure Ones after what they did to us?
What they did to us? They believe in me like no one else ever has. Metalbeak says the strong will triumph.
This is like almost exactly the first half hour of the movie, and this is the first book alone. We have 5 more books and an hour left. Uh-oh! But after escaping St. Aggie, Soren and Gylfi come across 2 other young owls who join their group and become the sort of core 4 of the series, also known as the Band. And now, I have to talk about Twilight and Digger. Twilight is a great gray owl who has absolutely no memory of his family. As he was hatching, he found himself in an egg being carried by St. Aggie's patrol back to the canyon, and this guy's first act as a newborn is to bite off the talon of the owl carrying him and drop from the sky. Luckily, he lands in an abandoned nest. Twilight has lived all over the southern kingdoms with all sorts of owl families, as well as families of foxes and other birds and etc. He's only a little bit older than Soren and Gylfi, but is far more worldly. He describes himself as being taught in the orphan school of tough learning. Twilight tries to come across as like a cool guy who doesn't need anyone, but I don't know, he finds himself in a found family pretty darn quick. Twilight likes to boast about his skills and strength in these little improvised ballads he sings while flying, which over the course of the series shift into more being morale-boosting songs for his companions. I love this guy a lot. Digger the burrowing owl was also displaced by St. Aggie's. He and his 2 brothers were attacked by a patrol consisting of Grimble and 2 long-eared owls named Jat and Jut, and while Grimble snatched one of his brothers, took him away, Jat and Jut started arguing about which one of them would get to eat Digger's brother, before ultimately deciding to share him. Again, Digger is about Soren and Gylfi's age, but luckily being a burrowing owl, he doesn't need to fly to escape. He's got strong legs and he can run. And he is still running as fast as his little legs can carry him when Soren, Gylfi, and Twilight come across him. By the way, Jat and Jut are in the movie, but these child-eating cannibals are basically relegated to comic relief because it's funny that their names sound similar. Digger is my favorite character in these books. He comes across as sort of a Linus from Peanuts, if you know what I mean. He is the philosopher, the deep thinker, he is very observant. While the other 3 do find him a bit strange, it's more because of his physical differences as a burrowing owl than any outstanding quirks of personality he has. Also, since neither Digger nor Twilight end up in canonical relationships by the end of the series, I'm personally choosing to believe that they are gay and in love, and you cannot stop it. If you want to point to characters just butchered in adaptation, you look at Twilight and Digger. Twilight is still boastful and unruly, but he is voiced by a guy in his 50s and you can tell.
For I am a poet, as much as a warrior. If you will.
He's not a plucky Dickensian orphan anymore. He's some weird old dude hanging out with a bunch of children. And Digger...
We were just looking for a place to hide and rest.
In which order?
What do you mean?
I mean, did you need to hide first or rest first?
What difference does it make?
Huge! If you need to hide first, I'd say you're in big trouble. But if resting was on your mind, I'd say your situation wasn't as dire.
Man, they did him dirty. F's in the chat for Digger. Like I said, these 2 are the most obvious examples, but basically every character has lost their nuance and complexity in adaptation, except for Kludd, you know, the racist. He has actually gained nuance and complexity. Remember when I said earlier that I thought that maybe Warner Brothers wanted a new Harry Potter series? So I actually filmed that intro before finishing my rewatch of the movie. And I did not realize how right I was. Characters from the Ga'Hoole series are neatly slotted into archetypes you would come across at Hogwarts. Soren is Harry, Easelrib is Dumbledore, Kludd as if like Draco was Harry's brother, Metalbeak is Voldemort, Twilight-Digger get to both be Ron with a bit of Neville mixed in, and then Gylfie is kind of like a less uptight hoity-toity Hermione, which makes her feel even less necessary as a character, considering already in the series, Ortolisa existed, fulfilling that role a lot better. The movie even invents a whole new mystical echidna to inform our heroes of the archetypes they fill before giving them directions to the Great Ga'Hoole Tree.
The warrior.
A poet warrior, please.
Strong and noble. The tracker. Sturdy and faithful. The navigator, who doubts. The leader, whose gizzard is strong. And finally...
Fun fact, Magic Knuckles' guide role here is actually filled in the second book by a working class sailor, Puffin, who also kind of shows our heroes that maybe owls aren't the only birds with some level of emotional intelligence. But hey, who needs like regular dudes when you can just throw in a knockoff Rafiki? The villain of this movie, the leader of the Pure Ones, is a guy called Metalbeak. Soren is telling his story in the first scene that he is kind of a legendary evildoer who was defeated by the legendary hero, Lyze of Kiel, at something called the Battle of the Ice Claws. Lyze of Kiel left Metalbeak with severe scars, which causes him to wear the metal mask that gave him his name. When the band gets to the Great Ga'Hoole Tree, which has basically been turned into Hogwarts, they meet an off-putting old screech owl named Easelrib. Now see, the teachers at the Ga'Hoole Tree are called Ribs, and Easel is Lyze spelled backwards. It takes my boy Soren way too long to figure this out. He's trying his best, okay? Pro tip from these books, if you want to like turn over a new leaf, just start going by your name backwards. Multiple characters in the series do this and it works out for all of them. After the Battle of the Ice Claws, Easelrib was traumatized and haunted by the war, and he changed his identity in order to teach at the Great Ga'Hoole Tree, but he doesn't teach like battle or anything, he teaches navigation. Now Soren actually isn't supposed to come across Metalbeak at all until he's been studying at the Great Ga'Hoole Tree for basically the equivalent of a college education, but since the movie has to squish all of this into the last hour of the movie, it has to completely change both Easelrib and Metalbeak's backstory. Yes, Easelrib fought in the Battle of the Ice Claws, but that battle was part of a pretty much unrelated war going on in the Northern Kingdom. A young Lyze of Kiel could not have fought and defeated Metalbeak because Metalbeak wasn't born yet, because Metalbeak is Kludd. Yeah, while Soren was off making friends at university, Kludd was rising in the ranks of the Pure Ones, eventually gaining the scars by defeating the previous High Taito and taking over completely. And Soren knows before this that Kludd was not a good guy. Like, Kludd tried to kill him. But the reveal of Metalbeak's identity also comes with the reveal that after Soren was snatched, Kludd went on to kill their parents and force Eglantine into an even harsher form of moon blinking known as moon scalding. There is no time for this whole Kludd arc to happen off screen in the movie, and since the movie basically has a dual perspective with Soren and Kludd, the reveal that Kludd is Metalbeak wouldn't even be a twist. So Metalbeak is just a completely separate owl. They made up a guy! Kludd having been radicalized so young makes you kind of realize that if it had been Soren and Kludd to come across this Pure One's patrol, maybe our naive protagonist would have also been radicalized into this idea of Taito supremacy. There's one scene in the movie that I actually really do like that kind of plays with this idea, when Soren finds out Easelrib's true identity.
Lyze of Kiel was my hero.
Yes, well, fancy it must be hard meeting your hero and seeing that he's real and not a myth.
You're just not...
What did you expect? Some Taito Alba with gleaming armor and battle claws? The moon rising behind him?
Oh.
Well, this is what it looks like when you've actually fought in battle. It's not glorious, it's not beautiful, it's not even heroic. It's merely doing what's right, and doing it again and again.
Legends of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole, why is it called that, does have the same general morals that the books do. War is bad, child slavery is bad, racism is bad, but let's be real. There are countless other kids' stories that teach these exact same lessons. There are a few things about the Ga'Hoole books that have really just always stuck with me. Like, I think about Mrs. Pliziver's arc at the Great Ga'Hoole Tree, where she learns that there are like more possibilities for a blind snake like her than to just be a nest maid, and she becomes a harpist. And there's descriptions of these really cool sequences where like these snakes weave through the strings of harps to play their music, and I would have loved to see that animated, instead of Twilight having another pointless musical number.
He's actually pretty good, you know.
Oh, I guess. If you like that sort of thing.
And speaking of Twilight, the fact that in these books, Soren is not the one to actually defeat Metalbeak, it's Twilight, the protagonist's friend, is something that I don't think I ever saw before reading this book, where our hero does not defeat the villain himself. It's the little things that make these books unique, and none of them are in this movie. I don't think Warner Brothers wanted a unique movie past the novelty of it being about owls. I kinda used to wonder why in examinations of Zack Snyder's work, people tend to leave out Legends of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole, but what I realized writing this is that there is nothing in this movie that he doesn't do more effectively in any of his other movies. Or if not more effectively, at least more memorably. He tackles brainwashing in Sucker Punch, racism in 300, the horrors of war in basically every movie he's made. He usually doesn't do it well in my opinion, but he does it. And because Gatug is a children's movie, he can't really go any deeper other than saying, yeah, this stuff is bad, right? I do think a lot of the dark stuff in children's books are lost in adaptation to movies, specifically because I think it is easier for kids to read about something bad happening to a character than to actually see it. So I understand having to cut out the parts that might make kids uncomfortable or scared, but it doesn't mean you also have to cut out the cool shit. Whether you like the way that Zack Snyder portrays his ethics in his movies, at least he's doing something. He's saying something. For Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole, you might as well just watch this movie on mute, because it looks great, and that's it. I would like to do a little bonus segment. I have this book, A Guidebook to the Great Tree, which has a bunch of like fun facts and like little short stories. And I want to just go through the glossary, because it's kind of fantastic. There are a lot of like terms they make up for these books, a lot of fantasy language, and this glossary is just a beautiful thing. Bonk, adjective. The strongest, most energetic fires. That's not an adjective, that's a noun. Okay. Creelies, noun. Heebie-jeebies. This is actually really like deep gray, noun. Just before dawn, when the black has faded but the sun has not yet spilled even the first sliver of a ray over the horizon. I like that. I think people should use that. Fleckasia, noun. The collective effect of flex on the owl, brain, and gizzard. I didn't even get into flex or gizzards. God. Fliv, verb, to flirt. You didn't need to make up a new word for that. Frink, verb, a rude word that means to severely irritate, as in, it frinks me off. This movie frinks me off. I love this one. Gazooling, noun, the noisy chatter of young owls. Hagsmire, noun, owl, hell. Huckla huckla, exclamation, snake speak, for young owls will be young owls. Scroom, noun, the disembodied spirit of an owl who has died but has not yet made his or her way to Glomora, which I'm pretty sure is owl heaven. Scroomsaw, noun, owl soul. Slipgizzle, noun, owl spy / secret agent. Sprink, verb and exclamation, the worst owl curse word. But spronk, noun, forbidden knowledge. Thronkinspear, noun, threat display. What? Yarp, verb, to cough up a pellet. Yarpy barpies, noun, owl diarrhea. And finally, how I feel after watching this movie, yoicks, adjective, crazy, loony, out of one's mind.